I mean, that makes me curious. When Caesar told me that we were going to talk with you guys, my perspective before doing any research about you guys was, oh, we're talking to another game. And this conversation feels a lot more like, hey, I'm talking to someone on the front lines of AI research more than I'm talking to a game developer. Like you are both. But did you come in to AI Arena intending to initially make a game, or was it AI research that started? And like, what was the chicken and what was the egg? Which one came first? You're listening to the Startup Stage on the 100X podcast. Matthew and Caesar here. We are joined by Wei from AI Arena, one of the more interesting games that I have seen in the entire crypto space. You guys are doing something really unique that I've legitimately never seen anybody do before. Truly blending AI and gaming, totally new concept. Excited to get into it. Thanks for joining us, Wei. Why don't you introduce just the general idea, however you would, if you were introducing AI Arena to somebody who had never heard of it, had no idea the context, how you would break down like, hey, this is what we're building. This is what we're bringing. Meet our friend AI Arena. Before we dig into everything this episode has to offer, we want to highlight the awesome partners who sponsor this podcast and make it possible for us to work full-time on 100X. They're legends, and we appreciate them for supporting us. Astrobit makes automated trading easier than ever. Connect to one of the integrated DEXs or centralized exchanges and start trading in minutes. Bring your own strategy in any language from anywhere. We also have you covered if you don't have a strategy. Browse our exclusive marketplace and find a strategy that fits your needs. Looking for a Bitcoin scalper, an ETH swing trader? Want to trade Doge automatically? Select one of the strategies built by experts and get started today. Life is hard. Crypto doesn't have to be. Set it, forget it, Astrobit. Use code 100X for 20% off your first month. Imagine a game where the cards you play and the units you command are ones you've created. This is the future with Void 2122, the new sci-fi strategy trading card game where you're not just a player, you can be a creator too. We've played it and it's actually fun. And let's be honest, that itself should be required in Web3 gaming. Play it now at void2122.com. Card packs are minting right now. Follow the link in the description to learn more.
Awesome. Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. Very excited to be here to talk about AI Arena. As a starting point, I would say you're correct. I think in our opinion, we do not see anything out there that is even remotely similar to what we have built in terms of an experience. That comes with its pros and cons, which we will get into later on. But at a high level, AI Arena is a game where AI is the focal point. And what we mean by that is the character that you control is actually an artificial intelligence model. The key differentiation of an AI model is that they are very flexible learning, like software, I guess. They're not like traditional game models where they are highly parameterized and are built with constraints that have been pre-designed by a creator who is the game developer. When you use an AI model, they are very flexible learning apparatuses, and they can start to learn a very wide spectrum of skills and capabilities and behaviors. And there are less constraints in terms of what they're able to do. So it's a lot more expressive in terms of an in-game experience. So at the core of AI Arena is characters that are powered by AI models. Now, the game primitive that we've applied this to in AI Arena is a fighting game construct. So it's a platform fighting game. Visually, when you watch the AIs fight, it will probably harken an imagery of Super Smash Bros., some of your favorite kind of platform fighting genre games. But it's important to remember that the core game loop is actually quite different. In AI Arena, the human player actually trains an AI to play the game. And then when the AI battles other AI characters, they are doing it autonomously in the arena. So it adds a different dimension to that experience. And the core experience of the gameplay is much more akin to something like, I've heard people describe it in a variety of different ways. Like one of the more recent descriptions is like if you imagine like Pokemon married with Tamagotchi. That's
Right.
kind of
You're
like
the actual Pokemon trainer this time.
exactly. You're the actual Pokemon trainer, and your Pokemon is like, in traditional Pokemon, they have 3 moves, 4 moves that you kind of just cycle through, right? In AI Arena, it's like you teach them any move that you want. You teach them defense tactics, offense tactics, meta strategies. They will implement that to spec of what you intended for them to do. And it's a crazy experience to let them, into the wild of the arena, so to speak, and see them fighting other AIs. There's just nothing like it. It's like such a high when your AI is starting to become really good, and yeah, it's just a fantastic experience. But that's a high level overview. I'm happy to get into the specifics.
Yeah, let's do it. Really, that was a good example. Caesar and I were talking about like how could we paint the picture of AI Arena, and from my perspective, it was like I'm playing Karate Kid, but I'm Mr. Miyagi instead of the Karate Kid. You're playing Ninja Turtles, and Caesar is Splinter instead of the Turtles.
Yes,
you're training your guys to go out to battle. Being the Pokemon trainer and not controlling the Pokemon themselves is another great example. And honestly, really unique. So the way the gameplay itself actually works, real similar. Like I've watched a bunch of gameplay, real similar to Super Smash Bros. But it's not me that's fighting on the platform. It's not Caesar that's fighting on the platform. It is our AI fighter that we have trained by fighting it, essentially. And so we've taught it the ropes, we've trained it in the gym, and we send it out to battle other people's AI fighters that they've trained in the gym.
Exactly.
Dude,
that's exactly it.
I'm curious with that because, I mean, that just opens up the world to a whole new possibilities. So how much creativity and how in-depth can it really get? Is it like you guys have a set amount of moves that you can train them to? Because I'm guessing from what I was reading, you guys start off with like a plain slate, like your character doesn't really know how to do much. Then you start training it, you start giving it, lessons and things like that. But how extensive can you really get it? Am I going to one day be able to teach my little character to do like backflips and like 3 spins and like fly in the air? Or like you guys have some sort of synchron trains so you don't have like characters flying off the screen later on once they get super advanced?
Yeah, so in terms of the action set or the move set, they are kind of constrained in the sense that we prescribe the components of these moves that are accessible, right? So there is, punches, there's defense mechanics like a shield, there's different types of variations of jumps, there's kicks, there's specials, which we call elementals. So there's probably, I don't know, like 20 to 30 different moves. Now, the combination of how you put those moves together in the environment that the AI is in, that's almost like an infinite permutation of what could take place, right?
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, even if an AI had like 5 moves, it can string together different behaviors in different situations that would appear to be, quite sophisticated, as if they were kind of like thinking ahead of what they're doing, right? Now, if you multiply that by like whatever 20 to 30 moves, it's actually very expressive. So in the true sense of, what is possible in terms of the outcome that you can get with your AI is basically, practically speaking, an infinite variety of AIs in terms of what people can get their AIs to do. Now, if you go and watch some of the highlights from our current set of like core players and what they have been able to achieve with their AIs, some of this stuff is like mind-boggling. Where I think we're getting to a point where, as you're watching those highlights, you're starting to question, like, hey, is a very high level, highly skilled traditional fighting game player, can they actually achieve those results in those situations? Like, it's starting to blur the lines of like, I wouldn't say the AIs today are kind of at or beyond a human level of like skill set. They are getting pretty close. And I think in specific situations, they're able to pull off things that only the most advanced like players are able to do in real life. And then there's also the other aspect of, there's just an element of like unpredictability, because you are not controlling this character. You are heavily invested in the character because you painstakingly train them to behave in a way. However, once you release them to fight, there is this element of unpredictability because you don't have control in that situation. So when you are a spectator and you're watching this essentially child that you raised fight.
Yeah, dude, you got your baby out there.
Like it's crazy. It's crazy because like the highs are it just euphoric when, especially if you're able to kind of like train it to beat really tough opponents.
Mm.
Like it's a very rewarding feeling. Conversely, it is also extremely frustrating at times because you're trying to tinker with your AI to try to figure out how to get an upper hand and some type of slight advantage on your opponent. But that's where the kind of the meta of the game is, and it's very deep. We call it infinite because ultimately it's humans training their AIs, and there's no skill ceiling here, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
yeah, I think the best comparison I would draw would be something like chess. Like
I was gonna
chess
ask
doesn't
that,
have yeah, chess doesn't have an end. Like there's no end to chess. It's just someone becomes better than everyone else and they start to push the boundaries of the game. Similar thing here. You just allow new people to come into the fold, experiment with the core game loop, and just continue to push the competition forward.
Well, and I think what's interesting, like using that chess analogy, I was actually going to ask about that. If you put like a grandmaster in chess against that is going to play the right moves, right? That is going to consistently play the human being, going to play the right moves. They're fantastic at chess, the best in the world. And you put them against an AI chess player that's going to play the right moves. There's like a specific gameplay loop that's going to happen when you've got two people doing the exact correct thing. But then if you throw in someone who's like not the grandmaster, right? And they're doing stuff
Matthew.
Yeah, you throw me in, and it's just something funky. Like the AI doesn't if the AI was expecting me to play the optimal move, and I don't, then I throw a kink in the machine. And so having this human element of, well, it's just real people training the AI how to fight. It's not going to be optimal every time because there's going to be different people with different styles training unique AIs. Rather than it's not like it's the optimal AI fighting against itself every time, right? It's like human engineered AI, which is so intriguing to me. It's
exactly. Yeah, the way to think about it is almost like you are passing on your skills into this digital vessel that becomes a representation of you, except it's always available, it's always there, it's always ready. So there's different features. It's like in some ways it's like kind of like I don't know, like a Black Mirror episode, right? It's like a vision of the future of how things may work, but you're absolutely right. Like ultimately, when you watch an AI, they inherit the characteristics that the human players imparted on it. And this is where it's a representation of you, and this is what makes it very emotionally intense when you watch these fights, because you're super connected to it, right? Just because you don't have control in that situation doesn't mean you're detached from the experience. In fact, if anything, the experience is perhaps magnified precisely because you don't have control in that situation.
I think one of the things that you mentioned, I think when you were talking about how like it works, and you were talking about, the 20, 30 moves that you have available, but chaining them together to create these like super moves, it just brought me back to trying to master certain combos in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And, you would get it once, you would get it right once out of every 50 times that you try. Well, now what you're saying is here, you just train your AI to do that specific move. You chain those 15 moves together to create something super amazing that someone on the other side maybe have a hard time to defend against. Well, now once they learn it, they're going to be able to replicate that more often than you would. Because I remember having hop on and really warm up before I even went into like the ranked sort of system, because I had to get my fingers warmed up. Well, now my AI is just going to be ready for me at all times. And I think that brings me to my next question. In your documents, you talk about the difference between sort of the research competition and the gaming competition. How does this actually fit into the game, and where do you see the two having differences and them sort of joining together?
Yeah. So let me take a step back to contextualize it first before I answer the question of similarities and differences. So what we're currently talking about is AI Arena, the video game. It's a game because it's a game interface that people interact with an AI through, right? So in our documentation, we call that the gaming competition. It's directly created for gamers. There is a separate version of the game, or competition if you want to call it that, called the researcher competition.
Hmm.
The objective of the game and the visual combat itself is exactly the same. It's the same problem that you're trying to solve. Let's call it that. However, the way that you train the AI is different, and it speaks to a different type of audience. On the game side is to gamers. On the researcher side, it's actually for engineers, specifically machine learning AI engineers or researchers. Because what they're able to do is they're actually able to design and then implement their own AI models. Whereas on the video game side, what we have done is we pre-built a model, and then everyone uses the same model. And what we're competing on is who is the best trainer, right? On the researcher side is, no, actually you can build your own model and train it and compete with it. So if you read like the analogy that we use in our documentation is like Formula One. Formula One is actually two components blended into one competition, where there is the drivers competition, and then there's the whatever it's called, like the team's championship or whatever, right? Where the team is an entire kind of organization of engineers, operations people competing to build the best racing machine, right? And then you hire a very talented driver to maximize that machine, right? So in the gaming competition, it would be as if everyone in this Formula One circuit has the exact same car. And the true differentiation is just Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton versus some of the other drivers, right? Like, who's the best driver? You get all the same cars. On the researcher competition, is different. It's like now you have
car itself.
Yeah, all the different constructors, all the different car brands competing against each other on the car first, and then you add the element of the driver as well. So that's the differentiation. So there's a target market differentiation. There is obviously an experience differentiation. I'll just touch on why we segregate the two. One reason is, very obviously, if you get to build and train your AI through software, those AIs are going to be superhuman at some point.
Yeah.
Because there's no longer bound by human limitations of how you train them. So you cannot have those AIs compete against human-trained AIs. It's just not a fair fight. It'll completely destroy the integrity of the competition. So we have to segregate the two. That's number one. However, there's two particular kind of intersection points that we see. The first one being the researcher platform, actually, what it creates over time is this competition of people building better and better AI models to start with for this game. So what we could end up doing is provide those people with an avenue to sell their creations into the gaming competition, so that now there's more cars that you can choose from to drive, right? That's number one. That's the interactivity point. Another interaction point is, I don't know if you guys have watched the documentary of Google's DeepMind and the AlphaGo algorithm that beat the human grandmaster in Go. This is like a really interesting, like, if you haven't checked it out, go.
I haven't seen the doc, but I know what the story you're talking about. Yeah.
So the premise, I mean, not the premise, one of the key things that unfolds from that documentary is that AIs playing the game, although they've far surpassed human skill levels, it creates inspiration for human players to discover and explore new ways of playing the game. So it actually allows humans to break through previous ceilings, because they effectively hit a certain kind of inspiration ceiling that they couldn't see where the game can evolve to. But with the demonstration of AI, they can now learn from a teacher that is vastly superior from them. It actually elevates the human.
Their student is the teacher.
Yes. So that's going to be another really interesting element to it, because we would love to see what comes out of these superhuman AIs. And I think within that, some of the best human players will start to figure out, oh, wow, okay, there's an opportunity here to actually embed this particular strategy and mechanic into these type of situations.
That's really fun. I played volleyball in high school. It's a random example here, but I played volleyball in high school, and I was okay. Like, I wasn't the best. I was a starting player, but I was probably the worst out of the 6 on my team, if I'm being honest. And then after high school, I went to coach volleyball teams. And I became a way better volleyball player from coaching the teams than I ever was from just playing. Even though I played and practiced all day long, I became a significantly better player because I was coaching and I was seeing other mistakes and I was seeing other things that people were doing correctly, things they were doing wrong. And it made me a better player. And so in the same way, it's essentially utilizing that idea of, hey, I get to take a step back and witness the whole spectrum. And that actually allows me to tinker with things. It reminds me of ChatGPT. I know you had like in your white paper, in your docs, you guys had a model of like the difference between the AI models of ChatGPT, of Midjourney, and then of what you guys have built. And it takes me back to, I remember when ChatGPT's first came out. And there was like some drama around some of the things that ChatGPT was willing to answer and some of the things it wasn't willing to answer, or the way that it would frame certain answers when you asked it questions based on if I asked with a certain lens, it would give me a specific answer. And there was like drama around that. But the reality was the reason it came from that is because someone programmed the language model, and that person who programmed it had an opinion. And that was the starting point. Whether or not you like it or not, that was the starting point, right? Now ChatGPT has evolved to the point of like it can scour the internet in real time. It's not stuck based on one opinion, and it's evolved. And so in a similar way, there's going to be all of these different models running around inside of AI Arena that are going to be based on the creator themselves. And I just think it's fascinating. Like I genuinely think that's a fascinating concept. The other thing I picked up on, before moving to some other questions that I think was worth noting, is I'm an older gamer now, right? You know, I'm not that old, but when you're a gamer, you feel like a boomer once you're not a teenager. Like,
once an 11-year-old is jumping on you in Call of Duty, you're getting old. when I was playing at a really competitive level with Call of Duty, I was fantastic. I was a teenager. Those kids roll me now. I would still think that I'm pretty good. I don't know. Whatever game I'm playing, like I would like to believe I'm in the 1%. But man, the 15-year-olds, the 16-year-olds, they're way better than I am. I get old. I'm not fast anymore, but I'm smarter. And I think the cool spin of what you guys are doing with the AI Arena is that I don't have to be the fastest guy in the room anymore to compete on that level. It's not just about my speed, because the AI can do that. If I can have the right tactics, if I can have the right intelligence, if I can essentially pour my brain into it, I can compete regardless of my age, because it's more about the strategy and about the idea and the tactic than it is about me being the fastest one in the room right then, because the AI can do that for me. So you guys, absolutely. I think when we're talking about like your ability to be competitive, and you were talking about the meta and how big it's going to get, I think you actually just opened up like a new can of worms when it comes to the competitive nature of esports, because it's no longer gate kept to a certain demographic that's capable of competing. I think you kind of open it up to anybody. And to me, that's really interesting.
It's 100% accurate. And we have the data to back it up. We have players in our ecosystem that are very good players who themselves admit the fact that they are garbage at playing traditional fighting games. Like they will get absolutely destroyed if they were to play themselves, and yet they are consistently a high-ranking player in AI Arena, exactly for the reasons that you highlighted, because it's a thinking game, it's a problem-solving game, it's a strategy game, it's kind of thinking through the meta, and understanding all of the different types of situations that you can be in, and setting up this. To distill it is like it's almost to think of like in every single different permutation or setting or situation in the game, there's a rock, paper, scissors dynamic going on, right? And you're kind of like extrapolating that to understand, okay, in this situation, I want my AI to behave in these ways, and they're all conditional on what their opponent is doing, right? So you can get super granular in terms of what that looks like, and you can try to anticipate where your opponent would do, and it's like just layers and layers and layers of that meta that you can keep going into and try to build that up, right?
Yeah, rather than just me like, oh my gosh, I think I found a new combo of these 20 moves to mix together. Well, now I can take that one and actually say, well, what's going to happen if I'm doing this specific combo and they do this combo? Like, are they going to counter it? Okay, let me train you how to react to that one.
Exactly.
And what you would need to switch if they do X or Y or Z. Yeah, that becomes limitless, because it's not just the fact that I'm messing around with 20 different actions, which in its own is like a limitless combination. But now, how does it respond to the limitless combinations of what my opponent does?
Exactly.
That's sweet. That's really cool.
I wanted to ask something here just to clarify, because I think what you said before about sort of how the research competition and the gaming competition differ, but still sort of like are going to work together in the end run. I think, just correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understood it is, one, you guys have created just a base model, an AI model for everyone to use, and that's sort of where their trainers come from and their fighters come from. The research competition is going to come into play by potentially some people who are in the research competition creating new base models that can then be implemented into the game. But then the research competition also helps because, you know, even though you feel like there isn't a cap or sort of game ceiling to this, if it in theory were to ever get to that point, then that means that the AI can sort of come in and, like the game master and the AI sort of analogy, they can come in and say, hey, well, now we can take you. Step back, Mr. Miyagi. Step back, Splinter. Now we're the masters, and we can teach you guys the new ceiling of it, and then just have that game be elevated through the AI after the sort of the input that we put in as players.
Yeah,
Is that sort of the idea?
Yeah, I think that's where the flywheel comes in, right? Because you know, part of the edge that a player could have on the gaming side is just to observe what everyone else is doing, right? And this is no different than something like mixed martial arts. And I think that's like a really good analogy here because number one, in mixed martial arts, it's mixed. So, i.e., you can't just be a boxer and win, right? Like, you can't just be only good on the ground game. You can't just be a wrestler. You have to be multidisciplinary and put everything together. Because the vastness of the different types of opponents that you will go up against requires that. Once you get to a certain level of MMA, what ends up happening is, yes, now you have this like very generalized skill set. You can dominate most competitors, but you start to have the game within the game of the top competitors because they're going out it becomes more PvP, right? It's like this guy has an upper hand on me for now. I need to come up with something that can overpower them. And it just keeps kind of going marginally inching forward with like the super minute advantages being ultimately the determinant of success, right? And that's where the ceiling gets pushed. So the research competition, I think, I don't know what's going to happen, I think, is going to be a source of inspiration for the top human players. Because at that level, it's just even the smallest little things can cause a dramatic difference. And where do you get inspiration for that? You can get it from watching other human players, or you can watch actually like superhuman AIs kind of doing their own things and watch for clues on how to improve the game.
On your like MMA analogy there, from my perspective, essentially what's happening is right now your base model is karate, right? All of the fighters are practicing karate, and it's at that level. I might be training my fighter in karate. That's awesome. Eventually, he's going to become better than I am, and he's going to train the AI is going to train the next level, and they're going to introduce judo. And then now you've got an advanced one. And then as that gets better and better, it's going to introduce something new. It's going to introduce something new to counter what it keeps bumping into. Because every time it hits a wall, every time there's a stalemate, or every time one guy is an inch ahead of the other, they're going to introduce another mechanic. And that is fascinating in itself. Do you guys see, I mean, I know this is like a little bit of an out there question, and then I think we'll go on to the blockchain. We've been hitting gameplay. Do you see, obviously having the research side of things, do you think that the research that you guys are doing with AI is going to have ramifications outside of AI Arena? Because in my mind, you've essentially discovered another way to test AI that it feels like nobody else is doing. It's like it's like large scale play testing AI.
Yeah. I think that's a great way of putting it. I think we think about it as crowdsourcing talent that are AI literate and giving them very interesting problems to solve. So there are like platforms out there today where what they do is they do crowdsource AI talent to compete on problems. Now, what we found is the gap in that kind of market is, you know, in our opinion, a lot of the problems aren't really that interesting. You know what I mean? And they start to kind of pigeonhole everyone into a particular niche or subfield of AI research. And for the longest time, it has been supervised learning. right? Or
Right.
supervised learning, unsupervised learning. And then for us is, we're coming to the table with something different, where on the researcher side, the base sub niche of AI research is called reinforcement learning. Whereas really designing an incentive structure for these models to pursue, and in so doing, by replicating it millions and millions and millions of times, that process, they start to learn very complex behavior patterns called policies, right? So, and then we give them a very interesting environment to try to solve this problem, which is this fighting game. And if you look at traditional machine learning competitions, ultimately what happens is the competition's result is this score. It's like this index value
Right.
that pops up, and it's exciting when you can get to an objective, but it's like, okay, it
now
kind
you
of
get to
falls
watch
flat.
a fight. Like,
Yeah,
you can
now
all sit around
it's
and
like,
watch a fight
exactly.
and see, this is what my research achieved.
Exactly. So that just heightens the entire experience to another level. And the aspiration for our researcher platform isn't just AI Arena. So AI Arena will effectively be one of the problems that people are competing to solve. There will be other problems that we set up for this captive audience of some of the best researcher talent in the world to sink their teeth into.
Yeah.
So what we intend to do is use AI Arena as a bootstrapping mechanism to congregate more and more of the talented AI people in the world to come in and compete on interesting problems. The bet is that once you get really smart people together and build a community around it, they will create value in various different ways. And it will start to attract sponsors, partners, big organizations to understand, hey, there is a viable pool of talent here that have coalesced around this community. And that could, start to create other vectors of us creating value for the community, for our project. And, beautiful things happen when you can start to create that innate kind of flywheel effect.
That is so cool. Did you guys, that makes me curious. When Caesar told me that we were going to talk with you guys, my perspective before doing any research about you guys was, we're talking to another game. And this conversation feels a lot more like, hey, I'm talking to someone on the front lines of AI research more than I'm talking to a game developer. Like, you are both. But did you come in to AI Arena intending to initially make a game, or was it AI research that started? And what was the chicken and what was the egg? Which one came first?
Great question. First of all, I will say that, so I'm one of the co-founders of the projects. There's two other co-founders, and there's a team of like 25 people that's currently working on the project. The whole conception of the idea was our founder and CEO, Brandon. It's his kind of brainchild. He's an AI engineer by training. We worked together previously, and we were applying AI in the financial markets context. So we were kind of working on algorithmic trading models powered by artificial intelligence.
Yep.
To have a track record in that space. So that's the starting point. So the vision has always been I think at its core, what we're trying to achieve is we recognize that AI is probably the most important technological theme of our lifetime. I don't think there's a debate about that. But the problem that we see is one of human talent. And I think we're on the very leading edge of humans coming to the realization that the speed at which AI is moving does have the potential to, at the very least, be extremely disruptive to everything that we know. But there is the prospect of AI just completely leapfrogging us as, a species in the context of how this is unfolding. Now, if we think about a world where humans have this viable position in this value chain, what it requires is people need to understand this stuff, right? And people need to understand how to interact with it, how to build on top of it, how to manipulate it in the sense of working with it. And what we see right now is there's such a large gap between the two things. And that gap is getting wider and wider by the minute. So our inspiration was, okay, this thing is going to continue to, press forward at a intense velocity. We need an apparatus to suck more human capital into this thing, right? And in a way that's substantive. So the way that it would contrast us to something like ChatGPT is like people like, oh, I use AI. I just prompt ChatGPT. It was like, yeah, you do, but you don't. That's not understanding AI. That is interfacing with an application to get some outputs, which is really powerful and useful. I'm not saying that it's not useful. Absolutely, it is, but it doesn't necessarily reveal the contents of that black box of how this thing actually works. Yes. So our objective is, can we, through a very engaging mechanism such as gaming, distill and abstract away that complexity so that not only are people more open to and incentivized to explore, in the process of exploration, they're actually having a lot of fun. And then this becomes a stepping stone for them to dive deeper into that rabbit hole and potentially become very, very adept developers, engineers that can now create solutions with AI. So in the reverse of what I was talking about on the researcher side, how that impacts the gaming side, what we see on the gaming side is the stepping stone, is the gateway for the uninitiated in AI to come through a game and potentially cross over into the developer side.
Okay. Spark that interest, you would say.
Yes.
We should really dive deeper into AI.
Yeah. So that's the mission. At the core of all this, we think of ourselves as a human capital company first and foremost. That's what we're doing. Everything else is an abstraction layer on top of that. What we're trying to do is coalesce human capital and give them the tools to build new IP on the back of the most profoundly impactful technological theme that's unfolding in our lifetimes.
Right. The game is the gas pedal that is driving you guys forward, but it is not the car.
No.
This is the way bigger picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that.
That's awesome. So I guess, I mean, we've been talking about a lot of the philosophy and the idea behind why AI started, why you guys believe that AI is important, and why gaming is the mechanism that you guys are going to start this journey. Talking about AI Arena, the actual game, a little bit, just so people know how it all comes together. I see that you guys are a browser game. Why did you guys decide to go this route? And is it to try to just reach as much of an audience as you can for ease of use? Why a browser game, and are you guys planning to go from there to go mobile and things like that? We can start there.
Yeah. So I think there's a few different ways of looking at that. First of all, because the game is very novel, and in fact the intellectual property and the tech stack that's built to power the game is completely proprietary. So the game development side is our engineering team has been working for over 24 months, 2 to 3, I don't know, I'm losing track of time now. We've been at it for like 3 years now.
Time in crypto just goes by fast.
It really does. And they, so everything is proprietary. We've coded everything from scratch, right? We don't use Unity. We don't use Unreal, any of these third-party engines. And the motivation to build on browser is exactly to your point. Browser we see as the universal distribution where there's no gatekeepers to access, which is important. Now, also, it just so happens that, wallet infrastructure in the Web3 context is built directly integrated to browser already, right? And certainly that has been the case for basically the entirety of like the crypto life cycle. So that's our starting point in terms of whether or not we have aspirations to go into mobile. I think certainly that's on the radar. However, there are some engineering considerations in terms of porting AI Arena, the game, into a mobile context, because we have to think through, like, how do you actually create a mechanic where people can precisely train their AI on a mobile device as opposed to something physical like a keyboard or a controller. So there are some engineering problems that we'll have to overcome, but it's all viable. It's just a matter of like prioritization and sequencing.
Awesome.
That makes sense.
How does Web3? So we've been talking about the game and everything AI. How does Web3 actually allow your vision of your full vision of AI and everything to come to fruition? What are you guys using the blockchain for?
Sure. So this speaks more to how we envision the broader business model behind this game.
Okay.
And I would say Web3 plays a role, it is not the entirety of why we exist, right? It's just a component as to why we think Web3 is a good fit for that component. So the starting point is the general audience of players over time of this game will not require Web3 to play this game. This is going to be a browser-based game, and it's going to be accessible to everyone. You don't need a wallet to play. In fact, it's a Gmail-based authentication, or you can use Discord or Twitter, right? You just need to be, and then you just use that, and you can log in and start playing.
Cool. Anyone can play, not just crypto users.
Exactly. So, okay, so then why even Web3? What is it about Web3 that we need? So Web3 to us is the professional tier of players. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. There's a
I
small
consider myself
cohort.
professional.
Exactly. It's a small cohort. It's a small cohort in our game. Okay. And basically, the way to think about the business model that we're constructing is to think about a traditional professional sports league. And if you think about what a sports league is from a business perspective, it's a content-based business, right? You have, let's take any professional sports. I'm a basketball fan. You have the NBA that has about 30 teams. And in those 30 teams, each roster has about 15 players. That's about 450 players in the world that gets to play at that level and earn money doing so.
Yeah.
That's it. There's about billions of people around the world that watch the game, that play it casually, but only about 500 people actually get to play for a living and earn money doing so. Those are the pros, right? Similarly, in our game, we control the amount of spots available in terms of people who can play at the pro level. And only those people get to earn money or earn our tokens to play. Everyone else is playing it for more casual, or they're aspiring to get to that level, but they're not earning, right? They're in it for other reasons. So this immediately makes the calculus around supply and demand of tokens much more balanced, because you have a small group of people earning relative to a large amount of people that should be theoretically spending into the system. So it balances, right? So that's the first feature. The second feature is the NFTs in our game is simultaneously a playable character, but it's also, you can think about it as almost like a franchise right. It's a claim, it's a partial claim on the ecosystem wealth of AI Arena that gets built over time. And so the players who own these NFTs, they effectively participate with the economic upside of this entire league. And that's very aligned, right? Because if you're the best player and you now have quote unquote skin in the game in terms of how well the league does, you're going to be much more motivated to push the game forward. You might start to think about, how do I market myself better? Because everything that I do that helps the ecosystem creates more value in the ecosystem. And ultimately that comes back to benefiting me as one of the core holders of that ecosystem value, right? Yeah. So that's where the Web3 part takes place. And the last thing I would say is, why do we run a professional circuit on Web3? It's because you can scale a global league instantly and frictionlessly. Because the financial layer of administering that incentive, you benefit from blockchain infrastructure. Yeah. So it's now borderless, it's efficient, it's almost immediate, right? And so the counterpart, like the opposite part of that would be, if I ask you, like, if you wanted to create a global sports league from day one, how would you do it with traditional finance? Like, imagine trying to pay someone in India that placed first this week, and there's like 500 players and they're all distributed around the world, and you're trying to use US dollars and you're like wiring all of this money. Like, you can't do it. Even like try to do like a giveaway of any type of monetary prize, right? A physical prize or a monetary prize, logistics, shipping, coordination, getting there, like it's almost impossible. But with Web3, easy. Like, literally, you probably need your own native asset, and that's it. Jump onto a blockchain, and you now have immediate distribution to a global audience, and now you can corral everyone into that forum very efficiently. that to us is the power of Web3. It is not to, in my opinion, is not to give everyone ownership of scarce assets. It obviously does not work. It's to administer value in an equitable way, much more efficiently and at a larger scale. So we use that specifically for our pro level of players. And that's the level that, gets to compete in a financialized way. Everyone else is kind of just, they're in it because they are aspiring, they're fans, they just like playing the game casually with their friends, all of that. But they're almost like the spectators that are kind of just following the really advanced gameplay of the pro circuit over time.
Okay. So for the regular user who wants to just play this casually, the Web 2 version of it, just a browser game, don't really need to connect, just create an account, connect your Twitter, you're able to play, enjoy, aspire to be something greater. The Web 3 aspect of it really comes in for like, hey, the super high end, the 0.1% of players who are going to be competing at the highest ranks. That's where Web 3 comes in and just facilitates everything that you guys do, from paying, from setting up the tournaments to everything. Web 3 just allows that to be super easy. I think you mentioned one thing that was super really interesting that I read in your documents and that you just briefly mentioned is about the tokenization of intellectual property, such as the AI models. How does that actually work within the AI arena?
Sure. So again, let's go back to the NFTs themselves. So the way that the Web3 game works is that you need to own an NFT, and or you could rent the NFT from someone that owns it in order to use it in game to start competing with it in the Web3 game. Okay, so you need to have an NFT to play. Now, because you have an NFT, it also means that now you have the opportunity to earn our native token as a function of competing in that league. So where does the monetization of IP come into play? What the intellectual property here is the improvement of your AI as a function of your training, right? So if we're to kind of disaggregate the NFT has like this image file, which is like the appearance of your fighter. And then there's this model where there's this kind of architecture, which is just the call it the physical matter of the model. But then there's the layer of the model where it learns stuff. And it learns stuff. The stuff that it's learning is a function of what you taught it.
Yeah.
Right? And in fact, over time, is this learned behavior that's valuable. Right? Or becomes
it's
more
those
and
skills
more
that you
valuable.
learn.
Exactly. So that intellectual property belongs to the holder of the NFT. Right? So this is what we mean by monetization of IP. Why? Because if your AI is more sophisticated and is better, it's going to have higher earning potential in the game. If it has higher earning potential, it should have higher market value. That's how markets work. So if you're good at training AI, there are multiple ways that you could monetize through this game, right? You can own it. You can speculate on its price. You can buy undervalued asset, change how it performs, sell it for more money, right? You can go in and you can start running your own team. If you're really good, you can like leverage and scale your skills by teaching other people. And then maybe you own your own assets and you rent out those assets to those people so that they basically play, like there's infinite permutations.
You create your
own
dojo.
Yes.
Damn.
So yeah, bringing it back to the karate. Now you're the dojo, you're Cobra Kai.
Absolutely
baby.
it. That's absolutely it. Yeah. So that's what we mean by like monetizing intellectual property. And this is, I think only now we're starting to see people talk about the concept of I think the new moniker is like dynamic NFTs. And I'm like, oh, that's a good way of framing it. We've been doing this forever. Just didn't come up with this like sexy marketing term for it. But yeah, it's dynamic NFTs in the sense that it evolves and it's verifiable how it has evolved. And it's transparent, it's clear, everyone can see it. And it performs because it's evolved and it performs at a different level. Thereby, there's going to be separation in terms of the value of different NFTs in this game, right? Some just probably going to be more valuable than another because they are better in the game. So,
damn. So I mean, if I put in like 10 years of my life into this, create the super prestige fighter, and I'm at the top rank, and one day you know what? I'm gonna hang up my boots I'm gonna pass this on, and then
You don't wear boots in mixed martial arts.
or hang up my cleats. I don't know. I watch soccer. That's what they say. You hang up your
Cleats,
boots.
you're gonna kill somebody?
Yeah.
But then you're able to pass that on to someone. Either you go ahead and sell your NFT, you have that intellectual property with you on the blockchain, and you can take it. I mean, that's really awesome. That's really what I thought gaming was going to be, just general in gaming in Web3. Unfortunately, that's not the case. But you guys are taking it back to the roots of what the idea was of what Web3 gaming can really be.
Absolutely. And this, I need to really stress this point. This is uniquely, what's the right word? Available, or it exists uniquely as a function of the fact that it's AIs as the model. It's very difficult to do this with a traditional game model, right? Because
right.
Yeah.
How do you do that? You pre-programmed what this asset can do, right? So, like in traditional games, there are certain weapons, certain characters that are just OP because someone made them OP. There's no ability for me to train a common Pokemon into a super rare Pokemon in the sense of how like the Pokemon distinct characters work within that kind of like structure, right? So if I get a common card, it's always going to be common. I can sell that and buy a rare card, but the rare card is because I had to purchase a rare card. I couldn't transform the common into a rare, if you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, you can't have a Pikachu do the moves of a Mewtwo. That's just not possible.
It's just not possible. In AI Arena, it's actually possible.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, you can buy whatever, the most, like, the worst trained AI, and just like, you know, in the worst case, you're like, whatever, I'm just going to reinitialize it, which is like the Men in Black, you know,
wipe
flash,
your brain.
you forget everything, you start from scratch, and then you just like, you know, start from scratch.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
Okay, Yoda.
Yeah.
Well, no, and that's awesome, because then that creates a very unique set case or use case for people who are just super skilled at the game. They're like, hey, I have taught my AI to be able to compete at the top 10 level. Let me go ahead and get some other NFTs at a super cheap level, train them to maybe be at the top 100 level, don't give them the secret sauce, but now you go ahead and create value from something that people didn't really train correctly. You wipe up that memory, you retrain them, and now you have yourself a little factory of amazing fighters.
Yep. And it's starting to, like, it's basically like if you think about traditional games and then real life sports, it's like migrating towards real life, right?
Yeah, it's getting closer and closer, right?
In real life. Yeah.
We call it esports, but oftentimes it's like it feels a little silly to call that a sport. And you guys are actually, yeah, you're right. You're bridging the gap a little bit. I think genuinely the only word that I could think about, or the only word that I could use to just concisely describe what you guys are doing is fascinating. It is actually fascinating to watch AI merged with gaming. I think when I saw AI in it, I'll be honest, man, I see people put AI in crypto and I get a little skeptical right away because everyone likes to throw the word AI onto it without actually doing it. And I would say of all of the AI projects we've looked at, I mean, you guys are at the upper echelon of actually utilizing AI and furthering AI's capabilities and capacity. Fantastic. Really cool.
And you guys do a really good job at explaining what you guys do very quickly. I think it took me 5 minutes looking at your website, watching the video that you have there on your docs. I was like, okay, I understand the value proposition and what they're doing. Sometimes projects do not do that very well, and it takes us like an hour of really trying to dig.
90% of the time.
Yeah. So kudos to you guys in really capturing that.
I think, you know, it's been a process of us, you know, refining the message over and over to get to where we are today. And I think we still have work to do there to just bridge the gap to even a more kind of casual audience, because, you know, for you guys, you've been in the Web3 space. So a lot of it is like muscle memory. So there are some unique features that you guys are digging in a bit more, but then all the other things you've innately internalized it. But for us to really kind of continue to get this more and more distilled, we're trying to become punchier and punchier with like our pitch around the game. And ultimately, I think the proof is in the pudding. When people come in, try it out, start to understand the game loop. This game goes extremely deep. Like, you know, I think there's an element of, because it's brand new as a game mechanic, like I always use this as an example, like if you play first-person shooter games, every single FPS game is the same. It's the same mechanic. Yeah. It's like refitted. The maps are a little bit different, whatever. But it's the same core game, right? Here is like can't rely on your prior derived intuition about a specific genre of gaming and expect to just cross over and be, competent at this game. It's like you have to start from scratch and just build it step by step. That is, like I said from the outset, there's pros and cons to it. The pros is it is unique. The con is there's friction in terms of onboarding. So our challenge is very different than 99% of the other projects out there. I don't think our challenge is to stand out, because we do stand out. Like, you put us into any, like Web2, it doesn't matter. As long as people discover us, they're like, whoa, this is cool, unique, I want to try it out. The challenge for us is how do we get them there to like the experience of that dopamine rush really, really quickly, because this is a new game mechanic that no one's really perfected it yet. So we're on that discovery journey of like getting that faster and faster and more refined so that you're getting to that point really quickly. And we know once you get to that point, it's over. This is like one of the most intense experiences. Once you get to a point where like your AI is really good, it is in no other ways, it's addictive. Like it's just unlike any other experience. And, we can, we've seen the stats of people who are competing at a high level and how much time they spent on this game. It's staggering. Because of this infinite layer, the meta game, the fact that you have to try to figure out your adversary and what they're doing, and your positioning on the leaderboard is constantly fluctuating. All of those things, like, just makes it it's very intense. So it's I certainly am excited by the prospects that soon more and more people are going to be able to experience the full game loop. And we'll just I'm keen to just watch what happens at the top of the leaderboard and just watch how these AIs evolve over time, because it's probably one of the most rewarding feelings in my career, is just to see what we've created and how people take the base that we created and just go off on it.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that you mentioned that, because I think you're right? Even though it took me about 5 minutes to really understand the core concept of what you guys are trying to do, that doesn't always necessarily translate to how long it's going to take me for me to pick it up. Because then I have to really learn how the mechanics work, tinker with the little... I saw some of the button. I was telling Matthew, I wonder how easy it's going to be for me to tinker with the actual settings and get my AI to actually do what I'm trying to teach it to do. If someone's really dedicated, they're willing to put in the 50 hours to do it. In those 50 hours, you might lose a lot of casual players along the way.
Yes.
So you're right, that really is the trick and the secret sauce that you guys have to find and perfect in order to make sure that within 10, 15 minutes, someone's able to get started and start feeling like, oh, wow, I just taught my fighter to do this, and now I can teach it to go further. The only other question that I have here before we can start getting into sort of the closing questions is your NRN token. You mentioned that only the highest echelon of players, the ones that are competing on the highest level, can earn this token. How do you guys see that token fitting into the ecosystem? And then you also mentioned that the casual players are going to have to spend that token to sort of interact. So how does your token fit into your ecosystem?
Yeah, so NRNs for us is, first and foremost, it's about incentive alignment. And its core utility is it helps us enforce the proper incentives of player behavior in the pro league. What do I mean by that? It means that because you're competing at the highest level, there has to be risk involved in every single decision that a pro player is making, right? When there's risk involved, people are kept honest in their actions because there's no free lunch, right? And that's the failure of a lot of system designs is as soon as you identify a way to repeatedly extract value from a system without fail or with minimum risk, that's an attack vector, and ultimately that will sow the demise of the ecosystem economically. So in our game, there's always some risk involved in every step of the action. Now, with that being said, it can simultaneously serve as a reward mechanism. So if you play this risk game properly, you should be rewarded more, because you're not only exhibiting skills in training AI, you're also exhibiting skill in managing risk around how you basically stake behind your AIs in the competition. So that's the utility of what the token brings in game. Beyond that, though, from a supply and demand perspective, it is true that initially the supply of our token is going to be inflationary, and it should be inflationary because as systems grow, you need inflation to attract more and more users into the ecosystem. You actually should not solve for outright deflation very early. That's actually not what you're supposed to do. Even though Web3 has this like perverse obsession with deflationary tokenomics, like it's not the objective. You don't do it, right? If you're trying to engineer that, okay, I don't know. It's adverse to growth. Okay, there's a good reason why in traditional economies you target a certain level of stable nominal growth. That's beside the point. Initially, the token is going to be inflationary. Now, the issue is you cannot allow inflation to just run rampant and always be inflationary because it has to be funded by something.
Yeah,
and this
the
is
printer
where
can't
like
just go brrr.
Exactly. So what you need is productive behavior or spending coming into the system. So then that begs the question, why do people spend in the first place? What is it that they find enjoyment from that they're willing to part financial assets in exchange for it? There are many reasons, but the short story is where you want the spending to happen is in the large base of casual players, right? The small group of pro players, you have to reward them for playing. The large base of casual players, you need to find ways to monetize them. So again, we take inspiration from traditional sports. When I said sports is a content business, why is it a content business? It's because LeBron, Giannis, and some of the best superstars, they create the most compelling gameplay that makes people want to watch, that makes people want to consume their jerseys, their shoes, their concession rights at the arenas, and then ultimately is the viewership, right? So the NBA monetizes primarily through TV deals, advertising, eyeballs, right? Those are clues as to how you can think about monetizing the large base is to build fandom and is building this kind of player-fan affinity to each other. So that's what we're trying to do, which also means you need this financial incentive for the best players to continue to compete and put the absolute best product out there.
Nice.
Right? So that's how it all comes together. And if you can get that spending engine going, what you're betting on is a larger base of players. Even on a per unit basis, they're spending a lower amount relative to how much the players are making on the other side. It still balances because of the sheer numbers game, right? So that's how we intend to kind of over time balance the economy. In the bootstrapping phase, you would expect inflation, but over time you have these spending vectors that offset that. So
nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. My thought process, the only other question I have while we're on the economy side of things, the tokenomics and all of that, is obviously I'm coming from a background of I entered crypto as a retail investor. The primary reason being you get into AI, you get into blockchain, you get into like forward moving tech. This is the future, right? So I like to obviously find cool gems that I can hedge my bets on. No project or company wants to say, yeah, come invest directly in this and we'll promise you a return. So I'm not going to ask you that question, obviously.
I appreciate that.
Trap you with the SEC or something. But really there is still this, hey dude, if you're building something that is innovative in Web3, people are going to speculate on it. Do you see, so the best way I feel like I can answer this question, you dance around it however you need to legally, but do you see people speculating on the NFTs and the access passes and the dojos in that sense? Do you see them speculating on the token? If retail investors wanted to come in and invest, where would you guess that they're going to speculate?
First of all, they're going to speculate, but it's not because we as a project promote our assets for speculation purposes. We actually do not do that at all, right?
Yeah, I saw none of that in the white paper.
No,
and that's the first in a while that I've seen none of it. Yeah,
exactly. And it frustrates a lot of people. They're like, I can't find anything about your tokenomics in this. And we're like, that's not the intent of the project. We are going to tell you how this token reinforces the alignment that we want to see in behavior. That's actually the most important thing. Yeah. It's not about the vesting schedule or what have you. And to be honest, people look at those things as if that's going to give them any clues on that stuff is completely manipulated by everyone. Like, it doesn't even matter. It actually does not matter. Like, the marginal supply and demand dynamics of a gaming project specifically has nothing to do with the vesting schedule. That's only just like one small component of how to piece together that picture, right? So for us, it's like, why would we lead off with that information? It bears no substance to our project. And also, yes, regulatory issues matter, and we're not here to peddle our tokens to you.
Yeah, you're not searching for investors so much as you're searching for researchers.
Yeah. And it will naturally take care of itself. Do I think that this is an opinion? Do I think there's going to be speculation? Yeah, of course. If you have an asset and there's a market around it, people are going to speculate with it. It doesn't matter if it's Web3. Do people know about commodity markets? Who do you think these professional traders are doing? They're speculating on the movement of the prices, right? So, of course, there's going to be speculation, but what we're focused on is designing things properly from a first principles perspective. Everything else will naturally take care of itself if there is utility and value in what we're building.
What chain is the token on, by the way?
It will be on Arbitrum. The NFTs are on Arbitrum. So what we have already started to issue is what's called the mint passes. So they're claims on the playable character once we launch on mainnet, which we are targeting to be Q1 2024. So it's coming quite soon. And starting probably December or January, we will be running a kind of what we call an incentivized testnet competition where people are invited in to play the game. And you can basically play to earn our airdrop.
Nice. That's a cool method.
Yeah. But it's fully competition based. Fully competition based.
Not just using it. It's competitive. Do you feel like, and if this question's too far, that's fine. But do you feel like the token, because based on your original answer before we even got to like speculation, it feels like the way that you've designed the token is intentionally around driving forward the research of the AI. Like you're incentivizing people to make wise decisions with their risks, which would enhance the ability for the AI research to move forward. Like you're actually, which I think is really smart. You're using the token as a risk reward incentive to further the AI research. Was that the sole goal, or do you feel like, have you guys designed the token in a way that it actually captures the value of that AI research? Okay.
Yes. So I wouldn't say it's the capture of the research. I would say it's the capture of the skill that the player is imparting on their AIs.
Cool.
And is it designed in a way to capture value? Absolutely. That's part of alignment, right? Yeah. And what we want out of all this is, if AI Arena is wildly successful, the early supporters and the people who have been playing the game at the highest level should be benefiting from it the most in staggering amounts. That just makes sense, right? Because they're the ones who brought the most value into the ecosystem. Why wouldn't the economics go back to them? That's how, well-functioning economic models ought to work, right? So it's all aligned. Like, we make no secrets. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to start to see that, it does make sense. Like, why wouldn't it work this way? This is how it's designed to work. So does it accrue value? By construct, it has to. So it's not that we're designing it to accrue value. It just will, because it's valuable. Yeah. So this is where I start to dance around, like, what people talk about, in Web3, people talk about like, floor price of our assets, token prices, whatever, market cap, fully that. No, I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm not here to push that on you. What I care about is intrinsic value that your NFTs possess. Intrinsic value. That's just fundamentally, what is your NFT worth based on the skills that you have attributed to it? Has nothing to do with market value, but there's obviously a relationship to it because we work in a market construct. Right. So, but if you take care of intrinsic value, other things will take care of itself. That's what we're focused on, intrinsic value. And there's no barriers to say that I can't improve myself as a person, and somehow that's like offside with regulations, or I can't be more have more ingenuity in building a better AI, and somehow that's like, all of a sudden that's a security. No, it's not. It's just you're making improvements, you're innovating,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it ought to have more value because it's just better.
Cool.
That makes sense.
Makes sense. That was a good way of. I don't think you breached anything there, but that makes sense. Yeah, I appreciate the way you answered that. Phenomenal. What would be closing question? People want to get involved in what you guys are doing. What would be the best place? Should they go somewhere to start playing? Should they jump in the Discord? Should they look for NFTs? I know tokens aren't out yet. Where if they're, whether that's as an investor or as a player or as a researcher, if they are as fascinated as I am, where should they go?
For sure. So there's a couple of places you can go. Just go to our main website, is aiarena.io. There you'll get to a landing page and you can click into like a pre-reg process where ultimately we record like your email and then we will provide you early access to the game. And it leads you to our Discord where you can join the community, start interacting with other people, learn how to play in a social construct. So that's one good place to just get activated in the game really quickly. You can obviously go to our Twitter. It all leads you to the same thing. And then the other area is docs, D-O-C-S, docs.aiarena.io, which is, I think, where you guys were doing the research. It really starts to spell out in detail every aspect of the project, the vision, what's the game competition relative to the researcher competition, something about the economy. So if you are coming more from that lens, probably go to the documentation site first and learn about the project that way. And then, just jump into this Discord server as well and just get early access. Because right now, we're pretty lenient with who we're allowing in to just give it a whirl. We're in the early stages of getting more and more volume of people in to just try it out, because there's some components that we're still testing in the game, and we would benefit from more volume of people to stress test the load. So we're in that kind of early access phase. In terms of timelines and major milestones, we are targeting an incentivized testnet competition January 2024. And we'll start to be more active in marketing for that probably towards the end of this year. And then that is the main focal campaign that allows people to earn our airdrops. And it's dependent on where you finish in the leaderboard.
The ranking.
Don't worry.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I've never seen a ranked airdrop thus far. So that is a fun spin on it.
Yes. Now, don't be scared. Like, you don't have to be the best player to earn an airdrop. It's all relative. Right? So if you put in the effort, you're going to get something. But if you're really good, you should get more. That's just... that just makes sense.
Easy.
So that's going to all start in January, and then we're targeting a mainnet launch in about March of next year.
Nice.
And how much are your mint passes for those who do want to go ahead and mint one?
So the way that the mint passes work is we give them away subject to people coming in and competing. So actually, like, there's a cohort of players in our Discord. They're within a environment called Exclusive Access. And they compete every 2 weeks, and it helps us test the game and all that. But they're competing for these mint passes. And if they place in the top, 3, 5, it used to be a lot more, like the top 50% of people get it mint pass. Nowadays, it's getting scarcer and scarcer. So it's like the top 3 people, top 5 people get it. So we give them away. We don't sell any of our mint passes.
Cool.
But if you don't want to go through all the trouble, but you're interested in it, you can purchase it on OpenSea. It's
secondhand
there.
from the people who have earned them.
Exactly.
Nice. So that's an interesting method too. I mean, it goes right back to you wanting to incentivize the top level players having the highest level of access, and so earn your way to the top. Very cool. Man, I dig the whole ecosystem. I am seriously intrigued by what you guys are building. Without a doubt, one of the most interesting conversations that I've had in a while. And we've talked to some really interesting people recently. So that's not like, hey, we've been talking to some dummies, so it's good to talk to you. Dude, I think what you guys are building is really, really interesting. We talk about AI a lot. And so it's cool to see someone applying it in a really practical way that's totally different. You have a gamified AI, and that has been a theory for a while, and I've not seen anyone do that effectively. So really, really excited to watch you guys, see what happens in January. We'll be tuning in closely.
I'm ready to start opening up my dojo.
Yep,
there
build
you
your
go.
dojos. These are
we actually have some dojos in our playtest server, so you can go and join on one right away, because there are people there teaching others how to play. So yeah, get involved in our community. It's a lot of fun.
Epic. Awesome. Thank you, Wei. We appreciate you coming. If you're listening right now, wherever you're listening from, you can find those specific links that Wei just referenced in the description of this episode. Check them out. Go follow along. Get involved in however you want to. This has been awesome. Reminder that nothing we talked about today is in any way supposed to be financial advice. It's not what we do. We talk about awesome people building awesome things. We don't tell you how to spend your money. We won't always agree with each other. So don't take that as advice. We'll see you soon. Much love.
Thanks, guys.